After sifting through one bag, she found she was searching for, a piece of sandpaper. Where's this going? Fluttershy walked around to the other side of Bloomberg, where a lone branch had been sawed in half. The remaining branch, which was almost exactly horizontal to the ground, was a height just below Fluttershy's chin. Fluttershy sat down next to the limb and hummed a tune as she began to sand. After the limb had become smooth and sleek, Fluttershy gave the limb a quick peck, and a gust of wind caused the tree to shiver. Fluttershy looked up and raised an eyebrow. "Do you like it when I kiss your wood?" she asked with a wink. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. That is, if you don't mind. Fluttershy quickly spun around, pulling her tail across Bloomberg's trunk and limb. She took the sandpaper in her mouth and pulled it back into her bags, and put it back in her bags. A steady breeze ruffled the tree's leaves as Fluttershy slowly circled the tree, dragging her tail along the trunk. Fluttershy came back to the front of the shortened branch and sat on her haunches. Bloomberg's leaves rustled as a strong breeze whipped Fluttershy's mane straight back. Fluttershy ducked her head under the limb and slowly licked it from the bottom of the shaft to the tip. A strong gust thrusted Bloomberg over Fluttershy as the tree draped over the Pegasus. A strong gust thrusted Bloomberg over Fluttershy as the tree's leaves draped over the Pegasus. Meep! Fluttershy stepped back as she squeaked. The gust subsided and the tree returned to standing straight up, branches bobbling in the wind. Fluttershy looked up with a hint of annoyance in her eyes. "Bloomberg, you always scare me when you do that. Now promise me you won't do that again." Leaves stirred in the wind. "No buts, mister." Fluttershy moved her hooves on her hips. The wind finally died and Bloomberg stopped moving, returning to his upright stance. "That's better." Fluttershy returned to her seat in front of the shortened branch and admired it for a bit. Months of sanding had given it an almost perfect cylindrical shape. It was wider near the trunk of the tree, with a girth of almost 2 inches, and the tip was a little more than half that. The limb was a hefty... Oh my god! Oh my god! The limb was a hefty 10 inches long and sleek, but not perfectly smooth. Fluttershy intentionally left bumps and ridges around the shaft to give herself the most pleasure. Oh man. 10 whole inches, wow. Fluttershy closed her eyes, smiled softly, and brought her face close to Bloomberg's limb. She inhaled deeply. Wow, I suck at pronouncing right now. His rich scent filling her nostrils as another shiver ran down her spine. She could also smell a hint of tree sap. Dots of his thick nectar were beginning to leak from their wooden prison as she could feel him begging for release. The scent swirled around in Fluttershy's head, jumbling her thoughts and widening her smile. A sensual exhale released Fluttershy from her temporary high while she glanced up at Bloomberg with her suggestive, cyan eyes. Fluttershy took the limb in her hooves and began to massage it. Slowly she began to pepper it with kisses. She started from the tip and kissed it all the way down the right side of the trunk. Gingerly, Fluttershy stuck her tongue out across the bottom and slid it up the tip and back down to the base. Fluttershy covered the right side of the branch with an open mouth and slid up, swirling her tongue against the smooth wood as she traveled. She gave the tip a playful bite as she could taste a bit of the delicious tree sap within Bloomberg. Fluttershy slid her mouth down the left side of the branch and brought her head underneath the limb, flicking her tongue back and forth as she drew her head out towards the tip. Fluttershy swirled her tongue around the tip of the shaft as her hooves caressed the sides. Slowly, Fluttershy snaked one of her hooves down between her legs. What? She was soaking wet and incredibly hard as she started to rub herself. Incredibly hot as she started to rub herself. Fluttershy rubbed deep in her haunches as she finally took the tree limb into her mouth. Fluttershy could taste the sap she was sucking out of Bloomburg, which causes her heart rate to skyrocket as she continued rubbing herself with her hoof. Fluttershy started bobbing her head up and down the shaft, sucking hard with every movement. Fluttershy started to feel flustered as her body was overcome with heat. She began rubbing herself more intensely, her legs spasming erratically with every circle she made. She also increased the speed she was sucking on the shaft. She worked him for ages before popping him out of her mouth and looking at Bloomburg with bright cyan eyes. Fluttershy took her hoof that had been between her legs and brought it to her muzzle. The smell of her juices was driving her wild. The taste drove her even wilder. Fluttershy continued to lick and suck on her hoof, teasing Bloomburg with her eyes. Bloomburg didn't make a sound. "I'll be right back. Don't you move." Fluttershy gave a quick lick to the tree limb, lapping up any sap she missed before, and trotted over to her saddlebags. After rummaging through one of them, she came back to Bloomburg with the Trojan horse condom. Sorry, you know how I always use protection. Still, I hope you don't mind. Bloomburg's branches swayed gently in the breeze. Fluttershy skillfully rolled the condom down the length of Bloomburg's limb. For this time, Fluttershy decided against lube. She was so wet that it would be unnecessary. Fluttershy licked her limbs as she turned around and stuck her tail in the air, exposing herself to the tree. Okay, Bloomburg, let's take this nice and slow. A breeze tickled Fluttershy's haunches and blew her pink mane over her eyes as she positioned herself in front of the branch. She twisted when she felt the warm tip against her slit. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. Fluttershy took a deep breath, bit her lower lip, and slowly pushed back. This is the part where I copy pasted it into the stream. Oh my god. It begins for... Here we go. She's around the sanded tree limb. The shaft easily parted Fluttershy's moist lips and slipped inside her. Bloomburg's limb became covered in the Pegasus's juices as it spread her out wide. Fluttershy gasped for air as Bloomburg filled her up. She took short, sharp breaths, and she was overcome with pleasure running through her body. Fluttershy stopped a third of the way down the shaft, taking a minute to catch her breath, while Bloomburg continued to stretch her apart. Fluttershy continued to push against the tree, driving the branch straight into her wet, tight body. Her jagged breathing slowed as she let her tongue roll out her muzzle. The sensation of Bloomburg sliding inside Fluttershy's body across her tight walls was making her sweat. She continued to push, waiting for Bloomburg to finally... Fluttershy squeaked. The bump she left on the shaft had hit her G-spot. Fluttershy reflexively clasped tight around the limb, composing herself to continue to push back into the tree. Her eyes rolled in the back of her head as she started heavily panting. Fluttershy was now 2/3 of the way down the limb. If she went any further, Bloomburg would tear her in half. Her heart was pounding through her chest while her entire body felt like it was on fire. Slowly, Fluttershy began to rock her hips back and forth, letting the shaft slide in and out at a gentle pace. Fluttershy slid. Oh god, this part. Oh god. Fluttershy slid on the shaft effortlessly, her juices acting as the perfect lubricant. Fluttershy spasmed every time the limb grazed her G-spot, while Fluttershy drilled herself into the tree. Grunts and moans escaped Fluttershy's mouth as she began to pant. Pleasure shot through Fluttershy's body, blurring her thoughts. As this was happening, a strong wind picked up, causing Bloomburg to start bucking violently back and forth. Oh, yes, call me dirty. Ugh, call me dirty. Fluttershy panted as she increased her rhythm against the gyrations of the tree. Her tongue flopped around with each push made against the tree, each push accented by a very sharp breath and a loud moan. Her eyes couldn't focus on anything around her but the wind as the wind blew her mane straight out in front of her. Fluttershy could smell her sex as the wind blew past. What? Her juices trickled down her legs, leaking out of her with every thrust back onto the tree. The tree branch slid through Fluttershy's body. The bumps rubbed against her G-spot. Each thrust was more pleasurable than the last as a buildup of pleasure was starting to develop in her haunches. Oh, yes. Yes, I am a tree. I'm a dirty tree, yes. Fluttershy barked. Fluttershy abruptly stopped. Not that trees are dirty. Fluttershy bit her lip and continued on her steady rhythm. Her body was on fire, her hind legs soaked, her mouth dry from panting, her throat hurt from screaming. She was in heaven. Fluttershy fought to keep her eyes open as she pounded away on the tree. The buildup of pressure in her joints signaled that she was close to coming. The wind intensity increased tremendously, causing Bloomburg to buck even wilder. Her high-pitched moans came out of Fluttershy's mouth as she made stronger thrusts against the wildly bucking tree, feeling Bloomburg slide in and out of her forcefully. In just a few more thrusts, she will... Fluttershy, is that you screaming? Fluttershy instinctively jumped backwards and gasped louder than she ever had before. Part of this was her being startled by Applejack's voice. The other part was because Bloomburg's entire 10-inch limb was now deep inside her. Fluttershy felt like she was being split in half at the seams. The wind didn't let up as Bloomburg kept bucking to and fro, sending vibrations through the limb, turning it into a natural vibrator. Fluttershy watched in horror as Applejack appeared around the bend in front of her and started trotting up to where she and Bloomburg was. Oh goodness, you're okay. We've been doing this for half an hour. Oh my god. I just looked. 29 minutes. Okay, let's finish this. Oh goodness, you're okay. I heard you screaming and I thought something might have attacked you. Fluttershy couldn't respond. She could only stare at Applejack with wide, terror-filled eyes as an open mouth as Bloomburg kept vibrating against her G-spot. The only audible sounds were coming from her were quick, sharp breaths Fluttershy was taking. She was creeping closer and closer to an orgasm with every passing second. Well, you sure as sugar look frightened. Sweet Apple Acres doesn't get its fair mean of critters, and they're mostly harmless, Applejack shared. What? Did she not even realize? Applejack shared. She walked over to Fluttershy's saddlebags on the ground. Fluttershy could only follow her with saucer-like eyes as her panting became more forceful and frantic. Short gusts of wind were ripping Bloomburg back and forth, causing the tree to gyrate even stronger. I'm sure gonna miss Bloomberg.